101. As soon as the recording starts, I will get started. All right. It says the recording has started. Let's hope it's not lying to me. So today we are going to read chapter 10 and 11. Tomorrow we're going to finish the book, chapter 12. We're going to finish the book. That means Wednesday by 7:45 a.m. your project is due. So before you come to school on Wednesday, all 24 of your questions, capital letters, punctuations, all of that needs to be turned in on Google Classroom. Wednesday you'll have a ReadWorks. Thursday, Friday, you'll just silently read for AR, and then it's the end of the 9 weeks. So if you guys are missing anything for reading RTI, you better be getting it done. But we are finishing the book tomorrow, so your project is due Wednesday morning. Any questions on that? Hopefully you're up to date on your project and you're not behind. If you are behind, you got a very little amount of time to get it done. But we're going to read chapters 10 and page 101. Dragging along and remember, he just got chocolates all over his beautiful birthday dress because he put his mouth in the bucket while bobbing for apples. And basically his life is next. No matter what he puts his mouth on turns to chocolate. His beautiful trumpet, the silverware, apples, everything chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. He's so thirsty. He's having a really rough time. His wish for everything to become chocolate has not been going too swimmingly. Dragging along and thinking of the dreadful thing that happened, John had walked about halfway home when he heard a cheery voice of his father. "Hello, hello," called Mr. Midas, crossing over from the other side of the street. He was on his way home from the station. "You left the party rather early, didn't you?" "What?" Mr. Midas had just seen the patches and streaks of chocolate that were drying on John's face and his clothes. "Good gracious," he said. "No wonder you left the party early. How did that happen?" "What's too fast, Landon?" Landon. I'm sorry, it's glitching. Follow along reading. John burst into tears. It had all been so awful, but now he could tell his father about his terrible day. He stopped crying and only sniffled a little now and then as he told the whole story. About the coin to the candy store, about buying the box that had turned out to only have one chocolate in it, about the toothpaste, about breakfast, the gloves, the silver dollar, the pencil, the lunch, the trumpet, and finally the apple donkey water. "You mean to tell me they all turned to chocolate?" Mr. Midas asked. "You're sure you didn't imagine some of this?" "Oh, no," John assured him. "Obviously, if this happened to you and you were trying to tell your parents, you would be super duper. They would be super, super not believing either, because that doesn't even make sense. Why would everything be turning into chocolate? That's silly." So I'm sure his dad is having a hard time believing him. "Well," Mr. Midas said, still looking doubtful, "we're only a couple blocks from the candy store of yours. Not that I've ever noticed one there. Suppose we stroll over and ask the man whether his chocolate always does strange things to people." "It's on the next corner," John said, recognizing some of the houses on the street. "Not the next house, but the next house. Not the next," he said, but John's voice faded into silence. Anyone want to tell me what they think's going to happen? They're going to see the candy store. Anyone want to make a quick prediction? Olivia, unmute yourself. Tell me what you think's going to happen.
It's not going to be there.
Okay, remember his dad's never seen it. That was the only time John had ever seen it. So maybe it's not going to be there. The corner where he found the candy store was nothing but an empty lot. Flat, open ground littered with a pile of rusty tin cans, broken bottles around the spinnery old sign saying, "For sale." Mr. Midas," said Mr. Midas, frowning anxiously at John. "I think we better pay a visit to Dr. Cameron before we go home." "That's where the store was, though," John protested, beginning to cry again. He had shed more tears in that one day, it seemed, and certainly eaten more chocolate in all the other days of his life put together. "I know it was." Dr. Cranem was a busy man. As luck would have it, however, he was able to see Mr. Midas and John almost at once. "Well, well, 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 well," said Dr. Cranem. "And how are we getting along, John? Have we cut down on our candy, eh?" "How do you do?" John responded doubtfully. Apparently he's had a bad day, Dr. Cranham. Mr. Midas said, trouble at school, and a little accident at the birthday party. What I'm worried about is that he keeps saying that everything he puts into his mouth turns to chocolate. No more than a nursery fantasy, I'm sure, Dr. Cranham said to Mr. Midas. Well, John, he went on, looking down with a smile, suppose you tell me, in your own words, what seems to be the matter. Everything I put in my mouth turns to chocolate, John exclaimed. Everything I eat, everything I drink turns into chocolate. I'm thirsty. I'm getting a pain. A bad one, I think. Dr. Cranham sighed patiently and invited John to open his mouth and say, ah. Ah, John said. Dr. Cranham peered into John's mouth briefly and gave a little cry. This chocolate eating simply must stop. He went to the supply cabinet. I don't think there's any time to be lost, he told Mr. Midas. I'm going to give the boy some of my own special compound. Dr. Cranham's Exire, I call it, never fails. Dr. Cranham selected a large bottle from one of the cabinet's crowded shelves. He removed the top up from the bottle and got a spoon from another shelf. He filled the spoon with an oily, greenish, yellowish medicine that had yellowish, reddish lights glinting in it. It doesn't taste very pleasant, Dr. Cranham warned John in a pleasant tone of voice, but I'm sure it'll do the trick. Clear the stomach and clear your mind. That's what I always say. Sorry, I dropped something. Dr. Cranham offered John the brimful spoon. Must I, John asked his father. I know it'll turn into chocolate. Go on, Mr. Midas nodded encouragingly. Drink it down. John took the spoon between his lips. The medicine turned to chocolate. The spoon turned to chocolate. John choked and sputtered, and chocolate syrup sputtered out of his mouth. Dr. Cranham dropped the spoon in alarm. When it struck the wood tile floor, the chocolate handle snapped into several pieces. Mercy, Dr. Cranham said. I've never seen anything like it. The boy's whole system seems to be so chocolified that the chocolifies everything it touches. After he had recovered somewhat, the doctor went on, I believe that this must be an unprecedented case of chocolatitis. I shall call it Cranham's disease. I shall want to make an exhaust study of the child. I think John has had enough excitement for one day, Mr. Midas said. Okay, so the doctor's seeing this crazy disease or whatever happen for the first time, and he's like, oh my gosh, I should name it after myself. I should discover it. Silly. All right, chapter 11. Basically, John's life, having a terrible time. Even adults are seeing what's happening. Nothing he can do will fix it. It's literally a terrible time. Chapter 11. Dun, da, da, da. Mrs. Midas was much upset when Mr. Midas told her that John had Dr. Cranham's disease. He said it was chocolatitis. Mr. Midas explained, a worried frown on his face, but he's calling it Dr. Cranham's disease because it was his discovery. Dr. Cranham didn't do it, John said. It's magic. It all started after I ate that chocolate. I'm scared, he added. Mrs. Midas sat down and dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She was crying. Mr. Midas blew his nose, said he had to attend to something, and abruptly left the room. John had been so busy feeling sorry for himself that he had not realized how his mother and father would feel about his chocolate disease. Never mind, Mother, he said, putting his arm around her shoulder. It's all right, really. Nothing was all right, but he couldn't bear to see his mother's tears. He kissed her wet cheek. His eyes were shut as his lips softly touched her, so he didn't see the change right away. Oh, snap. He kissed his mom, so he put his lips on his mom. Anything that touches his mouth turns to chocolate. Oh, no. His mom. Da, 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 da. Then his lips began to feel sticky. He opened his eyes. His mother had turned into a lifeless statue of chocolate. Oh, no. Now he lost his mom. John ran wildly out of the house without thinking where he was going or what he was going to do. All he knew was that somehow he must get help. For the first time in a long while, he forgot about himself altogether. Now he didn't care about anything but bringing his mom back to life. Without quite knowing how he got there, John found himself at the corner where he bought the chocolate box. The lot was no longer an untidy rubbish dump. The neat red brick building with 2 show windows was exactly where it had been in the first place. But the display of candy he had previously seen in the window was no longer there. In one window, John saw a chocolate trumpet, a chocolate pencil, a silver dollar with a piece bitten out of it. In the other window, he saw a cafeteria tray littered with chocolate utensils and remains of a chocolate lunch. Clearly, this place was the right one. Clearly, the proprietor must know a lot about John's hateful chocolate touch. John rushed into the store. Okay, so what was in the windows? Someone explain to me what was in those windows. Kaden, you want to unmute yourself and tell me what was in those windows? Mr. Kaden, are you speaking? Kaden. Mr. Kaden. Kaden, if your headphones are plugged in, unplug them so you can speak, bud. Kaden, can you speak, please? I don't want you to type. I want you to speak. What was in those windows? Okay, Kaden is not speaking. Someone else want to do it? Why can't he unmute? Okay, I don't know why he's not unmuting. Molly, unmute yourself.
Oh, okay.
Okay, wait. Hold on. Kaden said the stuff that he had turned to chocolate. Yeah, so the trumpet, the pencil, remember the silver dollar that was Susan's, everything that he had turned to chocolate was now magically in these windows. And remember, just a minute ago, thank you, Kaden, for answering. Just a minute ago, well, not a minute ago, but previously, this building was not there. And now the building is there, and maybe this guy will help John. The proprietor was standing behind the counter, carefully polishing something. Oh, wait, and it said John's hateful chocolate touch. Where have we heard the word chocolate touch before? Anyone? Where have we heard the chocolate touch before? Ooh, yep, Zach's showing me. The name of the book is called The Chocolate Touch. So instead of chocolatitis, John's calling it The Chocolate Touch. The proprietor was standing behind the counter, carefully positioning something small and round and flat and silver. I was just thinking of you, he said. John had no time to waste on pleasantries. Remember the coin I found and gave you when you gave me the magic chocolate? Without waiting for a reply, he babbled on. I ate it, and I made everything that touches my mouth turn to chocolate and kissed my mother, and now she's chocolate, and I've got to change her back. So he's going a mile a minute because he's so scared, so nervous, he just gets things back. Easy now, murmured the shopkeeper. Calm yourself. There was an expression of satisfaction in the old man's eyes. It's all your fault, John declared. If my mother isn't made better again, I'll fight you till you're dead. Oh my goodness, the storekeeper exclaimed. Whose fault did you say? Yours, John said. If you hadn't taken that money, I wouldn't have. Now, John, the storekeeper interrupted. I must insist on honesty. I'm glad to hear that you're thinking about your mother for a change. Unselfishness is important, but honesty is also important. If you'll be truthful, perhaps I can help you. John's ears reddened. It was becoming unmistakably evident to him that he had only himself to blame for all this unhappiness. He looked straight into the storekeeper's eyes. I'll do anything. I'll work for you all my life for nothing if you'll turn my mother back. You can turn me to chocolate instead if you want. The storekeeper apparently ignored John's offer. You were right, John, he said, when you guessed that I had something to do with your acquiring the chocolate touch. But you yourself earned that coin and bought the chocolate touch. Only greedy people can even see that kind of money. Dr. Cranham was right up to a point. I suppose that one could say you had chocolatitis, but it was just an outward sign of selfishness. My mother, John reminded the storekeeper frantically, my mother's turned to chocolate. Do something about it. Oh, please, do something about it. I'm glad that you are concerned, the storekeeper continued unhurriedly. Part of your cure is to be concerned about other people. You have been so greedy that you didn't care what happened to other people. Oh, I know, John admitted woefully. But please, decide about me later, and please make my mother better now. Well, John, the storekeeper said, if you had to choose between getting rid of your chocolate touch and restoring your mother to life, which would it be? For one moment, John couldn't help imagining a future of all chocolate meals. The thought was terrible. But then he thought of his mother, as she had been when he left her, a motionless chocolate statue, unable to speak, her chocolate hand is still holding her lace handkerchief. Without further hesitation, John said, help my mother. Well, John, the storekeeper said, I'm going to give you another chance. When next you go to school, your chocolate pencil will be a real wooden pencil with lead in it. But John began to protest. What did the pencil matter? The chocolate knife and fork and spoon you left on your lunch tray will have turned back to metal. Your chocolate trumpet will be shiny gold again. But, John said, don't worry about Dr. Cranham's spoon. He will find a whole silver one on the floor where the broken chocolate one lay. But how about, John said, Susan Butterscup will discover the chocolate stains on her party dress and her party shoes were nothing but water after all. Her silver dollar will be all right. John could stand the suspense no longer. My mother, he shouted. What about my mother? Will she be all right? The storekeeper smiled. Why don't you run along home and find out, he suggested. John turned without even saying goodbye and ran out of the store. The shopkeeper went back to the disc that he had been polishing, a disc the size of a quarter. It had the polish smooth, ready for a new set of initials in case the need for them should arise. All right, we're going to stop there. You have 11 minutes. That means you have 4 questions. You have 2 for chapter 10 and 2 for chapter 11 to work on. Tomorrow we will finish the book. We only have 1 chapter left, and then you will have the rest of the time to work on your questions. Remember, your questions are due Wednesday morning. Are there any questions before I leave? Angelina?
How come we aren't finishing the book today when there's only 5 more pages of it?
Because I want to finish the book tomorrow. That's the way I scheduled it. So long, friends. We will finish tomorrow. Work on your questions. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.